This is the Utiliquip UMI12000PWE and Figure 8 system. We're going to first off go through how to basically load a reel and how the safety locks work to get started. Inside this compartment, this is the pendant that has all the controls for the power line wheels and the cradle that lifts the reel up. First off, you want to disengage your locks. We have a manual secondary lock here that has to be rotated like this to set up the latch. I'm going to go on the other side and I'll set that one so you can see it clearly. This just rotates up. This will turn and unlock the mechanism so that when it's lowered, it'll automatically disengage. And you just take your pendant and you push the down. Now these spacers that are on here, these inners are intended for the rotating device, which they would go inside the reel before you insert the drawbar. You would take this whole mechanism out, take these off, put them in the reel. Slide these locking bushings. You see they have a bolt here. Once you get these positioned in the reel, you lock these up tight against those, lock them down. That sets your reel in the center of the pin where you want it. And then you lock these down and you're good. Now these will rotate and these will be locked. So you have least resistance on your reel turning while you're either using the figure 8 or the makeup or power line. After you got all that set, it's pretty simple. It's just a push button, raise back up. The safety locking mechanisms will engage on their own. They're automatic. There's no operator input needed. Once this stops, you just let off the button and you're loaded, you're locked in. These locks are set, they will not disengage. If it were to blow a hydraulic line or something and the cradle were to try to go down, it would just lock right there and would not come down. It will not come down. These are power down cylinders. They're pushing on it now and it will not disengage. So it's designed to safety trap everything if something should fail. Hydraulic line, cylinder, pin falls out, something like that, it traps it. So when using the power line system, you always want to make sure that the pressure is on those cylinders to keep the cradle locked in tight, because what that does is squeeze this pin here. It sandwiches it in between these two brackets to make it tight to where it doesn't turn. This is locked. It won't turn, it won't spin. The spacers will spin and not the pin. So that's the basic loading and unloading. On the heavier reels, if you are using anything above 3,000 pounds or picking up anything more than 3,000, you'll want to set these legs before picking up, because without these down, it will try to pick up the tongue of the trailer. That's in the instance of a shock load. If you were raising up and stopping and start again, it may pick the front of the trailer a little bit, so you always want to set these. Especially if it's not hooked to a truck, you have to set these to keep it from flipping up in the front. So that's the basic operation of how to load and unload a reel. All right, this is the UMI12000PWE gas powered hydraulic power pack that runs the makeup system, power line makeup system, and the figure 8 system. The hydraulic source is here. It's a 10-gallon reservoir, which is, as you can see, it's a square tank in here. It is a Honda engine. It is pull start. So the biggest thing about these engines when you're driving and hauling them down the road, you always need to turn the gas off, which is a little switch right here that just flips that turns the gas off. Now when you're getting ready to start on the job site, turn the gas on, choke it. The e-stop right here controls the main power to the motor or the ignition. So this has to be in the up position, which is a clockwise turn. It pops up. That's a regular e-stop. So there is a shut off in here for the motor. As you can see, we marked it just on off, this little switch, but we leave that switch on all the time and just use this e-stop to shut it off because it's easier accessible. The top compartment here is where your gas goes, easy access. And then if you come around this other side and look in to check the oil dipstick is right here. There's a dipstick right there. You see it? There's a plug and dipstick. And filter, hydraulic filter, needs maintenance every 500 hours. That should be switched out. And this is the auxiliary power circuit that runs the cradle and the arms, engages the wheel arms. So this is a whole separate system. It has a hydraulic reservoir also, which is a 2.5 gallon, and the fill for it's that red cap right there. Shouldn't ever have to check that or anything unless you have some external leak somewhere. This is the fill here for the power pack hydraulic, which is all labeled. You can see what oil goes in it and everything, so that's very easy. This is the speed control for the hydraulics. This overrides everything. If this is on 0, you get no flow. It all just returns right back to tank. None of the implements work at all. This is basically a throttle for the hydraulics. You turn it to 10, you get full flow, maximum pump output to the implements. That doesn't mean they're going to come on. It just means when you do ask for the implement to work, you get the full flow. The best setting for beginning is right around 3. That gives you just enough flow to get you started what you're doing. So that stays locked there. If you need more, you crank it up. If you need less, you turn it down just a little bit. And that's a feel. That's something you'll get a feel for as your material, you work with your material. And also we got a solar charger up here that trickle charges the 12-volt battery for the auxiliary system. This will not charge the battery if it's completely dead. It will take a few days for that to happen. But if this is sitting in the yard for weeks at a time, this will maintain the battery. That's what that is on there for. So whenever you go to operate this system, this particular system is fully remote. There is no hand control valves. There is nothing other than this throttle control on this to operate the functions. So engaging these wheels into the reel is done by pendant control on this side. That is these buttons to have an arrow. The cord always hangs downward, and these buttons have an arrow going back and forth, which mimics the action of these wheels. So if you had a reel on there, the smallest reel you could get, let's just say you have a 50-inch reel on there, this will engage all the way in to the smallest reel you can get on that lowest setting. So that's your engage setting. When it touches the reel and squeezes up against it, that's all you need to stop. And once that's in place, when you're going to use the makeup system, there's a selector valve right here that either selects these wheels or this power line, or this figure 8 system here. That button distinguishes which function's getting used. When it's down, it's in the figure 8. When it's up, it's in the power line. This valve here is a hydraulic brake for when you're using the figure 8 system. You can control your slack on your cable reel by tensioning it with hydraulic pressure. Now, when the figure 8 is running and pulling cable off, if these wheels weren't engaged, you would get a tendency to bird nest or loosen the cable on the reel, and it may come unwound and make a mess of the reel. So what we do is engage these, leave them engaged to the reel, open this valve all the way up, and start paying out with your figure 8 system. And as you need to adjust tension on the reel, you tighten this in a clockwise until you see the proper tension starting to gain on the reel. If you get this too tight, these wheels will stop like a brake, and they'll have too much resistance, and it will cause the figure 8 to start slipping, and the cable will just slip through the wheels of the figure 8. And then you just back this off a little until you get the proper amount of tension. That's what this does. In a normal operation, when you're using these wheels, this is locked down counterclockwise, tightened down. There is a cushioning valve here. What that does is if the reel is spinning very fast and you just let off of the control, these are a dual function relief that lets it line relief in a loop until the reel stops spinning, so it doesn't jerk everything really quick. That's what that is for. All right, now the other function here on these power line wheels, these are fully adjustable. Right now they're unlocked, and you can slide these wheels to meet the rim of pretty much any size reel that you're gonna actually be power winding with. So, and they do offset both directions. So you put them where you need them to match your reel, tighten these bolts down, that locks them in place, and you're good to go. So, normally with most fiber reels, you're going to be all the way out here to the end on the settings. You can tighten these down with a wrench. Alright, we're firing up this Honda engine on the power pack, and I'm going to run through this remote control setup. Now, the power line and the figure 8's fully remote. There is no manual controls for this other than your speed control. In the little toolbox, you got your little pendant remote control. Press the red button down and then pop it back up. Press the green button to engage it. The LED will flash on the controller. The two blue buttons are your forward and reverse. The flow control, you want to set it at 0 and engage a function. You'll hear the audible alarm sound, and then slowly run this throttle function back up until you see movement out of the wheels. This procedure will help you from, like if the last setting the machine was used on was up really fast, you don't want to get started that way and it, put a shock load on everything or tangle up your cable and things. So the selector valve on the frame selects between figure 8 and the power line. The same control, forward and reverse, just transfers over to the figure 8 from the power line wheels. Now in the stow position, which is transport position with all this figure 8, you got multiple locking pins. You got the main locking pin, and then you have like a safety pin that is a steady rest for the head so it doesn't swing if one of the locks should disengage. In order to unstow this and set it up, you pull these pins. There's some hairpins, and you pull that main pin out. Down at the base there's a 90-degree swing pin that has to come out also. That's there to stop the boom from swinging out. And once you pull those 3 pins, you can just grab this arm and pull out on it, and this whole thing will swing out 90 degrees to the back of the trailer. Once you get that in place, reinstall your 90-degree pin in the base of it. You may have to move it around just a little bit to get it to line up, and once that's in there, that lower boom won't swing, but there is a safety tension, like a lock on there that you have to tighten down to keep any, keep it from wiggling around on that pin down below. And you would disengage your secondary boom lock. It's a spring-loaded pin that will stay up in normal operation. And then on the head itself there's another spring lock that you raise that will allow the head to swing on the secondary boom. When you are ready to start using this to figure 8, you'll kind of transfer that secondary boom over to a 90-degree angle off of the main boom, and that gets you pretty close to center on your reel, whatever size reel you have. There's enough distance away that the cable angle won't be too steep or too sharp. So when you're ready to set up the cable, you loosen your tension device on the head. Just back that up until you'll see that wheel up top. When you push in on this wheel a little bit, the top idler wheel will lift and give you the gap you need to install your cable. So once you got that gap that you need, you go around and take your cable, and we're just going to use a small piece of cable right now, as we don't have a fiber reel in stock at the moment, but we're going to install this experimental piece of cable here just to show you how this setup works. And there is a groove in that top idler, which you can see the cable fits in that groove to keep it centered on that wheel and keep it centered on the drive wheel also. But once you install that cable, go back around and tighten down your tensioner until that cable is firmly pinched between the 2 wheels. You don't want to really crank it down super tight. You just want to tighten it enough to where you don't get slippage on that idler wheel. Once you get it where you think you should be, you just check it by hand. You can feel whether or not it's grabbing just by trying to turn that wheel. You just want to take it to the point to where it doesn't really slip anymore. You get it too tight, then you're taking the chance of over stressing your cable and breaking glass in the cable. So we're just trying to get enough tension to where these 2 wheels will have traction and pull the cable. once you got that locked in there. And the red lever that's on that handle, you just lock that down. It's like a secondary lock. There's guides that will keep the cable from getting frayed or the casing from getting damaged at whatever angle you go off of the reel. We don't recommend you go at a too sharp of angle, like a 90-degree from the head. And then go over, there's a storage container here with your feed pipe in it. This is a split tube that can be installed on a live cable run if needed. Right now we're just going to slip this over the cable. You would typically spread that open and just kind of feed your cable through it like this. But we're gonna feed it in the end, just for ease of operation here, because we're dealing with a short cable. Those pointed ears go to the sides of the wheels so that it guides the cable more towards the center. If it should happen to pop out, it can't escape those wheels easily. And once you got that in there, you just crank down the lock a little bit. Now you're dealing with plastic PVC pipe, so you don't want to really super tighten that, just enough to keep it in place. And if it does come out, it's not like it's going to damage the cable or anything. You can just stick it back in and tighten it down a little more. Maximum speed you got right now at 2. You want to reverse. It's the same speed forward and reverse. Like I said, you will hardly ever need to reverse a cable while you're figure eighting, unless you got a little pile that you're having a problem with. You need to pay back in a little, but you won't want to slack your cable too much around your reel. So the optimal speed is at 3 on your throttle valve, and that gives you a nice smooth feed. When you crank it up to 10, it really throws out. I mean, you can get 750 feet per minute out of this. So you really got to get used to it and know what you're doing in order to get that kind of cable payout and smoothly lay your pile. So as you can see, very smooth operation. This will be pulling off of your reel. See if it starts to slip, then you can tighten your wheel a little bit. You don't want too much pinch on that cable. You are dealing with fiber optic, and it does not like to be squeezed or break the glass if you over tension it. Alright, we're going to wind this back up, our sample piece of cable here. And then I'm going to show you the output that it will do. I'm going to turn up the volume. This is a very fast speed that this cable would pay out if you cranked it up. That's very fast. You're getting ready to run your figure 8 system. As we stated earlier, these wheels need to be engaged into the reel, touching the reel. Now when you do that and you select the figure 8 system with this valve, you need to open this brake valve all the way up so that you have no resistance on these wheels until you start to feed cable and you feel that you need tension. You can put a little tension on by tightening this counterclockwise. That will create a hydraulic tension brake on this motor and this shaft, and that'll control your tension on your reel right here. So to begin with, you want to open it up. That lets no brake. with it open. So then we're going to come back here. Once again, this is a fully remote control system. There is no manual controls anywhere to control either motor rotation. It's all done by this little remote. So what has to happen, you got to reset it and then turn it on and press the start button. You'll see a green LED light. Once that LED light flashes, then you're live. This has two directions, forward and reverse. And right now, you see that's forward, that's pushing cable out. Reverse will pull back in, which you'll never, I shouldn't say never, you'll very rarely ever reverse the cable while you're figure eighting. The option is there to go in reverse, and you can see that it's not going to be the most effective thing anyway. It's going to slip a lot. So when you're figure eighting, there's a couple different ways to do this. This could be controlled by a separate operator standing back being a spotter, or the guy on the other end controlling the figure eight could run this. While he's working the cable, he could do this and watch. And if something goes wrong, he lets off, the machine stops. Or the operator that's manually controlling the head can hold his hand on this also. The reason we do it this way is it's an operator presence. Someone has to have their thumb on this for it to rotate. If something happens, you just happen to get pinched in the cable or something, you're going to let off of this button and it's going to stop. So one thing about operating this boom system, you never want to stand between the working head and the real cable. In other words, this handle on this side and this boom, everything, the operator should always be on the outside of this boom. If you stand here, you are subject to pinching, because the tension on this could draw this. If anything were to go wrong, this boom could get drawn in to the reel. So you don't want to stand on this side of the operating head. You always want to be on the other side. That's why there's only one handle here. You should be on the side with the handle at all times. And this sweeping function, this pivot point here is greasable. This pivot point is greasable. If this should get stiff and hard to move, then you need to put some grease in it. So when you're figure eighting, you're going to be just like this. This whole thing's going to rotate. So I'm going to feed this cable through just to show you how it feeds through. This isn't a very good experiment for the actual job site, but it will show you how this system will work. If you look at the cable, there's two red lines on each wheel. The reason those red lines are there is for you to visually be able to tell if the cable is slipping. How you're going to do that is you'll see the bottom wheel, you'll be able to tell is turning, and the top one will be not turning. That means your cable is not turning. It's not paying out. That means the bottom wheel is slipping. It's spinning, the top one's barely spinning. You're not getting a good grip on your cable, and it's not flowing the way it's supposed to. And I can show you an example of that. I loosen this tension up. And I'm going to show you that. See how those wheels spin? So you're not getting a good grip on your cable. That's what those red lines help you to see that. So we're going to tighten it back up. Lock it down. Same out here. We're ready to start figure eighting, whether the control's being held by the operator or the person doing the figure eighting on the ground, controlling the pile. Whenever you're ready to go, just press start, or I'm sorry, press the out button. Now, if this is too fast, how you control that is back here at this throttle valve. Right now at 2. You want to reverse. It's the same speed forward and reverse. Like I said, you will hardly ever need to reverse a cable while you're figure eighting. Unless you got a little pile that you're having a problem with, you need to pay back in a little. But you won't want to slack your cable too much around your reel. So the optimal speed is at 3 on your throttle valve, and that gives you a nice smooth feed. When you crank it up to 10, it really throws out. I mean, you can get 750 feet per minute out of this. So you really got to get used to it and know what you're doing in order to get that kind of cable payout and smoothly lay your pile. So as you can see, very smooth operation. This will be pulling off of your reel. See if it starts to slip, then you can tighten your wheel a little bit. You don't want too much pinch on that cable. You are dealing with fiber optic, and it does not like to be squeezed or break the glass if you over tension it. Wind this back up, our sample piece of cable here, and then I'm going to show you the output that it will do. I'm going to turn up the volume. Very fast speed that this cable would pay out if you cranked it up. That's very fast. Alright, so now we're ready to stow. We use this machine all we need to. We need to break it down, stow it back on the trailer. So now we just take our pipe off, loosen this clamp, slide this out. This goes up in its stow position. Locks on this if you like. Right now we just have these little screw hatch, and this is accessible from both sides. All right, now you want to center your head back up straight by rotating this lower arm over. You always want to try to get these hoses on the other side of your pivot point, like that. And you lock this arm, locks in place. That's straight forward, and then you rotate your head straight forward, throw that lock down, move it into place. Now pull this pin here, loosen the lock on the back just a little, grab by the handle, rotate back around, main locking pin. They got your Stow steady rest. Pop this pin in. The pin's in place. Pop this one in. Very crucial that these get installed before you try to transport this unit. It's not crucial, it's mandatory. You do not install these pins, you take the risk of this unit swinging out and contacting a vehicle or a pole or anything that could happen if you did not lock these in place where they belong. So there's a small pin that goes in there. This is like a hairpin cotter pin. Make sure you lock that in good. This 90-degree pin also goes in to keep the boom from swinging out accidentally while you're driving down the road. Absolutely crucial that this goes in. And then once everything is in place, lock down here. This is even like a fourth safety precaution that this is locked. And tighten down this nut with a wrench that we'll have in the toolbox. Tighten that, the handle, make sure your 90-degree pin is secured. Your main locking pin. Your boom locks you should have already had in place, and your head lock. And then the final steady rest, which locks this thing in, keeps it from swinging out while it's driving down the road. Plenty of clearance for any other operation, things not in the way. So it's a good idea to lock this head wheel down while transporting. Make sure it's tight. It just keeps everything tight and it won't be shaking going down the road. So that's the Stow operation for the Figure 8.